Okay, thank you. This is part number 3, and I'm going to share my source sheet. I added another source to the one that was sent out. It's on the website, but it's a tiny little source. We'll have it there, but in case I'll make note when we put in the new section. Okay, so we did the theme of Teshuva, and we explained the title in the first year. Second year, we followed the theme we did Sefer Breshit, then we did in Sefer Shemot last week. And today we're going to do Nevi'im. But in order to appreciate the theme of Tshuva and Nevi'im, I want to begin with a review we talked about the number 40, but just a general observation about the number 40 and the number 7 in Tanakh. Okay. I'm going to bring a pasuk which I think sort of encapsulates it. If you remember in chapter 7, before the flood's about to start, God's telling Noach, Ki liyamim od shiva, onochi mamtir al haaretz 40 yom v'40 layla. In 7 more days, it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, does anyone know a similar pasuk or similar setup in Sefer Shemot at Har Sinai? Anything come to mind? We're in the same section. We have 7 days and then 40 days following.
Yeah, Moshe had to wait 7 days on the mountain before God called him up into the
Yeah.
cloud.
Very good.
Yeah.
Right there. So for those who didn't catch on, I'm sorry, not 34, chapter 24. My mistake. I just opened up my Tanakh real fast. In chapter 24, Moshe goes up in Pasuk Yud Bet to get the Luchot HaEved, the Torah and the Mitzvah, right after the Ten Commandments. And Moshe goes up the mountain in verse 15. And then Vayishkom Kvod Hashem Har Sinai. And God calls Moshe on the 7th day. We go here 6 and 7. And then Moshe goes into the Anan, and Moshe is on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, that's just another example that I didn't bring last week of the parallel between the flood story and Har Sinai. We followed the theme of covenant a little bit and how that relates. I'll try to put that all together this week. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the number 7 come up a lot in Sefer Breshit and Chumash?
Of course.
A lot, right? Now, but is there a pattern? Now, the first time it comes up, it's clearly related to the story of creation in Perek Aleph, where God's name is Elohim. That should be obvious. And the number 40 comes up in the story of the flood, with God, starting over again and bringing the flood and doing a supernatural event. So, where else in Sefer Breshit do we have the number 7 other than in creation?
The flood story also,
Within 7, yeah, but it's the flood story is more into the 40 than the 7, but there's
Yeah,
7 there in the
Yaakov,
beginning.
Yaakov, and the 7 years for Rachel.
No,
7 years.
the 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty. In that story, 7 parot, remember? And 7, I mean that matches because that's the thing. And 7 shibolim. But notice again the connection between nature. If chapter 1 of Bereshit is about God making nature, anything that has to do with nature and the misunderstanding that there are many powers of nature, which Chumash calls Elohim, other gods, as opposed to Elohim, one God who created all the powers of nature. Therefore, whenever I have something where I want to highlight that even though there appears to be many powers or different powers of nature, it's really one power behind nature, it's always going to be 7. All the agricultural holidays, 7 days of Chag HaMatzot in the Aviv, 7 weeks, Teshuva, and 7 days of Chag HaSukkot, possibly even the 7th month for Yomim Noraim, even though there's a better reason for that. 7, even getting married, Yaakov has to wait 7 years for each shidduch. There's 7 there.
And the 7 carbonot that Avram makes with Elimelech.
Yeah, but the 7 kvasim, okay, and 7. But in general, the number 7 is going to come up a lot, especially in holidays that relate to nature. The number 40, where does that come up a lot? So do we have 40 in Sefer Breshit other than the flood? I'm pretty sure we don't, except Brit Ben Abtarim, which is also God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei, because it's 10 times 40. 400 years is part of the 40 theme. And Brit Ben Abtarim, God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei again, goes hand in hand. And then when we come out of Egypt, it's been 400 years.
Yitzchak was 40 when he got married.
As was Esav, right?
Yeah.
They're back to back, right? Yitzchak was 40 which is interesting. I'm not sure whether that relates to the theme of that might just be, happen to be 40. But it's not going to be, I can't put seven there, but 40. The 70, the family of 70 that goes down in their, like in their birth, in their genealogies might relate to 7 times 10.
There's
But
also the 7 plus 7 years that Yaakov had to work for Lavan, right?
work for
In order
Laban to get a
marry
wife. That
Rivka.
relates again to Peruvu and nature.
The 7 nations that are pitted against Israel?
Ah, that's interesting because but
Yeah.
the number actually named changed in Brit Benetem it's 10. Only later in Chumash it's 7, and then turns out to 6. But the number 7,
Right.
but in Dvarim I think it says one time Shivat, they're called 7. The
Mhm.
name 7, even though the actual nations changed a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm getting at though is 40 relates to God being more, I guess, more supernatural involvement in an event, where 7 more relates to nature. Now, what I want to relate to that is that day-to-day life, I guess the skeleton of our existence, like of nature, that's 7. On top of that, we have history, we have the events going up and down. But in every put it this way, in every cycle of nature, like we have every year, we have a daily cycle, so 7 days of Shabbat. We have yearly natural cycle of the seasons, every 7 years of Shemitah. So whenever there's a natural cycle of a year or a day, something related to the sun, then maybe even the moon, because then that's going to be the 7th month. But I'm going to put 7 on top of something which is a natural cycle to bring God to sort of override nature, or to maybe not override, but to make sure I highlight that even though there appears to be gods of nature, there's one God who made that all, who's in charge of all that.
The,
We'll see soon how that will relate to Teshuva.
the Sheven Minim,
The Sheva Minim, again, it doesn't say 7, but you can count 7. That's true, but that does relate to agriculture. Very good point. And probably that's why the rabbis use the number 7, because there happens to be 7 in the pasuk, but it doesn't say 7, but there are 7, and that's the word that Chazal used for it for sure. But they all relate to nature. And then 40, we're going to see God more involved in events. Now, the last week we talked about 40 in the story of Har Sinai, 40 days, before Chet HaEgel, and then Chet HaEgel, Moshe praying for 40 days to stop the punishment, and then 40 days extra prayer to bring the Brit back. That was last week's topic. Now, there's one more time in Chumash that we have 40 after Chet HaEgel. Where's that? There's one more major story that has to do with
After the
Shuvah.
after the Tayarim, then they get 40 years
Yeah.
in the desert.
What we
40
call them
years.
Raglim, which Chumash calls the Tayarim. But there's 40 days that they spy the land or come back after 40 days, and then the punishment is for 40 years in the
Yeah,
desert.
yes, 40 years in the
Yeah, but
40
Chumash
Mishana
uses-
Midbar.
Now that's going to tell you that 40 and punishment go hand in hand. It's too much. That's too coincidental. The flood story, where God wipes out his creation, starts over, that's 40. Chet HaEgel relates to 40. But the need for 40 to fix the sin of Chet HaEgel, to repent. And then 40 for the punishment, for the sin of the spies and the punishment. So 40 and Tshuva go together. Now, in case you didn't look at the source sheet, where in Tanakh do we have stories of 40? Anything come to mind? Stories in Tanakh have the number 40 in them. Okay, good. You guys didn't peek and look at the source sheet. That's good.
Eliyahu, did you just say Nevi'im?
Yeah, Nevi'im.
Oh, okay, so that's, Eliyahu and the,
Eliel goes to Har Sinai 40 days and 40 nights. That's a no-brainer. And that's after the whole Achav story, which takes us to our title. Tshuva from Adam to Achav. So we have 40 in the story of Adam Arishon and 40 in the story with Achav and Eliel. Eliel after it's Hashem Elokim, and then he gives up because it didn't work. Any other Navi story with 40?
Yeah, there's Yechezkel, where he had to lay on his right side for 40 days.
Oh, Yechezkel, right? Yes,
Symbolize
40
the
days, 40
duration
days
of
on his right side and left side, and 40 days for 40. There's 390 and then 40.
Right. There's like Yonah had a prophesy.
Oh, yeah, Yonah. I think Rabbi Shuma's giving it
after
a
40
series.
days.
He's trying to tie together Yonah and Eliel. And that's
And
going to be one. I'm sure.
in Menachem, aren't some of the kings 40-year king? ruler?
Shlomo's 40 years, I think.
And David,
Shlomo
right,
and
David as
David.
well.
Yeah.
What?
Okay.
The
And
cycle,
David.
And David's 40 years, that's right, altogether, including Hebron.
the cycle in Sefer
Ah,
Shoftim.
Sefer Shoftim, exactly, yeah. In other words, the cycle of Sefer Shoftim, that's a no-brainer 40, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yonah, 40 days, Ninvei Nefechet, 40 days with Yonah, with Teshuva's story. 40 days with Eliyahu, Sid and Teshuva's story. You can't miss, and that's the, again, that's what I call objective analysis. You can't miss that the number 40 goes hand in hand, not just with Teshuva, but with God punishing or being upset by bad behavior and doing something about it, and the ability to learn from that mistake and grow from it, and that's going to be God's attributes of mercy. So what I want to show you today,
Unrelated, also, wasn't the Beis Hamikdash 40 cubits in one direction, length or width?
40, I think,
One of the temple measurements was.
yeah. I mean, that could
40.
be, if it was a strange measurement, that didn't make sense. It was one thing. I'm sure that could just, like, there's a lot of people who, like, there's, when I did a search for 40, I did Ala Torah. So a lot of the tribes are 40,000, 42,000, like there's Shoshab Arbai Melech, but considering 600,000 people in 12 tribes, there's a good chance to be about 40,000 something, in the range of 40. So that could be just, that may not be significant. It might be that's how it comes out. Now, so I want to use that 40 to try to see if I can identify a theme that ties them all together, or at least gives us a direction. And in case you want a reminder when you daven, where does Tehillim say it all? You should know by heart. Remember in Kabbalat Shabbat?
Rabbi Shana Kut
Kut
Bador.
Bador. Yeah, now, that's always, luckily we don't understand what we're saying when we daven. But for the Chazan to sing it so proudly, Rabbi Shana Kut Bador, like, wow, we're so excited. It's the way we sing it doesn't really fit so much into its meaning, but that's a different problem. But again, the theme of 40 years for sure is in Tehillim as well, in relating to punishment, isn't it? If Arben Shana Kut Bador, that's talking about Teshuva. But again, the whole idea is you can do Teshuva from that. Now, I want to begin with the midot that Moshe uses after the sin of the spies. Because I simply owe that topic from last week. Last week, I jumped to Nevi'im a little bit too early, and I didn't finish Chet HaEgel. I mean, Chet HaMraglim after Chet HaEgel. So I'm going to take the 5 minutes, 10 minutes I took last week to get to after the spies. Moshe prays after Chet HaMraglim. Anyone remember what does God threaten to do after Chet HaMraglim?
The usual, to kill everybody.
To wipe them out.
Wipe everyone out and make either Moshe or people like Moshe.
Make Moshe
Get rid of the riffraff and only the perfect people can go in. Of course, Moshe, unlike Noach, davens. Now, what is Moshe daven for? Yeah, but does he pray? No,
God Shekhinah should be within the camp.
does he pray for that? After Chet HaEgel, we'll see that he prays for the Shekhinah to return. No, God took the Shekhinah away. Remember, after Chet HaEgel, God takes the Shekhinah away. The first 40 days Moshe prays is to not punish them immediately. Remember? Menachem Hashem al Ra'ah. The first 40 days he promises, he davens, and God decides not to destroy them, but doesn't bring the Shekhinah back. The second 40 days, the next prayer is where Moshe argues, bring your Shekhinah back as well. Notice there's two stages after Chet HaEgel. One is to stay the punishment, the immediate punishment. And then what's Moshe's logic there? What will Egypt say? Remember? And you made a brit with the Avot.
You couldn't do it.
But who couldn't do it?
Hashem
was not able to.
Was
Yeah,
it?
but Moshe's arguing, but why the tefillah means like to argue with God. He's saying, why in God it's in your interest not to kill them immediately, because what will Egypt say, etc. Now, and therefore God decides, okay, I won't kill them. But the question is, will God be with them? Because the covenant's broken. And then Moshe argues for a new covenant. That's what changes that new covenant is God's attributes of mercy that enables God to be with us even though we're not perfect. After Chet HaMraglim, we'll go back to that in a minute. After Chet HaMraglim, God says, let me wipe them out. Moshe davens similarly, what will Egypt say? It'll be Chilo Hashem. And he's going to invoke God's Midot of Rachamim. We'll have to see which ones. But what does he ask for besides not to kill them in the desert? What's the most he could ask for?
Slicha.
Is God going to wipe away the sin altogether? Or only stay the punishment? In other words, the most Moshe could ask for is bring him to, even though they sin, bring him to Israel anyhow. Remember, after Chet HaEgel says, even though they sin, bring your Shekhinah back. And God gives in and changes Midot of Rachamim. After Chet HaMraglim, Moshe doesn't daven, wipe out the sin, forget it. No, wipe it out, and let's go to Israel. Moshe agrees with God that this generation can't go to Israel. The question is, do I kill all the bad people and bring the good people in? Or so, but that would be a Chilo Hashem. And therefore, Moshe davens, don't kill them, but he didn't say, oh, please let them go in anyhow. We'll see in a minute, and therefore God says, we'll see in a minute, Salachti Kidvarecha. You see where we're going? And I want to use that to explain how Moshe davens now.
Right, and
Moshe's not
Moshe
davening allowed to wipe out the sin and forgive them, because Moshe agrees with God, they're not worthy to go in the land. They're not ready. And it's the lost, that generation's the lost cause. Remember, Vainasu Tazer Pamim? It was 10 times, or that's it. They're not fixable. The only question is, do I kill them right away or wait? And when Moshe davens, don't kill them because that'll be a Chil Hashem, wait till that generation goes, that can explain why when Moshe says in Devarim, right after Chet HaMraglim, because of you I can't go in also, the second Moshe says, wait 40 years, he's not going to be the leader. Like, it's not, like it was almost his decision. Because once he prays to save the people, at 120 you're not going to be the leader anymore. Even though he could have been, but that's another way of looking at it. But that's a class in Bamidbar. Okay, now we can share my source sheet, and I'm going to show you all the things we just did.
I wish rabbis would read the Chumash before giving their drushes for Yom Kippur. They say Yom Kippur is the day that God said, Vayom Hashem salachti kidvarecha. Not true. God's Vayom Hashem salachti kidvarecha
Was after,
Tisha Is
Oh, by the way,
Tisha
someone mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago that Vayavor Shema Panav Ve'ikra was Moshe davening. No, the machloket is on the previous pasuk. Okay, Vayer Hashem Banan Beitatzevi Mosham Ve'ikra. No, on pasuk Hey, I think not before. I mean pasuk Daled before pasuk Hey. I'll show you the psukim, but no one says that Moshe declared the Midot of Rachamim. That for sure, everyone says God did. The question is, when God first met Moshe Rabbeinu right beforehand, did Moshe first call upon God and then God called out his Midot? But that argument over who's mityatzeiv with who and who's calling out, that's on the previous pasuk, not on the. I checked the Tirgum, the Unkelus there, and the argument about Unkelus is on the previous pasuk, not on, because in Pshat, God declares his Midot of Rachamim, not Moshe. Now back to you can look in Unkelus later on in chapter 34. Now let me go back to my screen and get to work. Okay, so we talked about the number 40 and 70 and how they relate to. This is more obvious punishment, like, and this will be more, and 7 will be more related to nature. Now, I want to just review one thing, which will help us understand the what's Yossi missing. Put it this way: whenever people daven later on in Tanakh, El Rachum v'Chanun comes up a lot. Oh, want to see something really amazing? I noticed like this. One more stop. Check it out on Ala Torah if you want. But I did a word search of Rachum in all of Tanakh. The word Rachum, just the word Rachum by itself. Guess how many times in all of Tanakh, from Breshit to Divrei Yamim, how many times is the word Rachum in Tanakh? Guess what? 13.
7. How many?
13.
13.
And the word Chanun is how many times?
13.
Now, 11 of them overlap. But sometimes God's Chanun and not Rachum, and sometimes Rachum and not Chanun. But there's two. Each one has 2 other times where these are Rachum, just Chanun by itself. But it's really neat that Rachum is 13 times in all Tanakh, and Rachum and Chanun is Rachum and Chanun each alone. And 10, I think 10 or 11 overlap, but 2 don't. But it's really just, I think it's just a cute coincidence. I don't think I highly doubt that's intentional, but it comes out really neat. But it's a nice way to remember. Now, Rachamim comes up a lot, but the word Rachum itself and the word Chanun itself, check your concordancia or do a Ala Torah search. I double checked with the concordancia also on Shabbat, because And there's also 13 in there. That was like really cute. Now, back to, let's get to work finally. I want to make a point that when people daven, one of the midot that's missing, let me show you you'll tell me in a minute. If I open up my here. When people daven, we talked about Hashem is El Rachum v'Chanun as opposed to El Kana. And Erech HaPayim is opposed to Charonaf. Now, the big change in Ten Commandments, Hashem is Oseh Chesed Lo-Havai L'Shomrei Mitzvotai. In other words, God does Chesed for Ohavai, but not only for Ohavai and Shomrei Mitzvotai. Now, what Chazal say here, Rav Chesed and Notzeh Chesed, Chazal say Rav Chesed is Rosh Havetovlo, and Notzeh Chesed is Tzadik V'Ralo. It means Rav Chesed, people get an abundance of Chesed, more than they deserve. Not only Lo Havai, anyone can get Chesed, and sometimes God holds back Chesed and will give it to him later. Now, I want to claim something. I'm not sure if I'm right, but I'll share with you an idea that I hope I'm not wrong here, but I think emet might not be actually an attribute, but sort of a footnote or a comment. I'll explain what I mean. Let me draw am I going to do this? I want to make annotate. How do I get I need a blank. Wait, let me stop the share for a second. I want to draw something. There's a way to do that I have to share my screen. No. How do I get a whiteboard? No, it's not a share.
Just click on whiteboard and it'll come up and then you have to share.
Whiteboard before the share or after the share?
No, like right now, I just on the bottom there, just click on whiteboard.
I don't see which one is whiteboard. Maybe under more. A whiteboard. Here we go. Okay, that's why I couldn't find it. Okay, new whiteboard. Appa. I'm going to draw something. Hope I could draw this. Okay.
Yeah,
Don't show. I've been used this a long time. Okay.
that's
My
good.
whiteboard. Okay. Who remembers integrals? That's an integral. Okay. From t. Okay, equals 0 to infinity. Remember that? I can't draw that. Okay. In other words, if I take an integral, that's a terrible drawing. I should have drawn it beforehand. Of chesed. Oh, I should do. I could actually type text it. That's better. Okay. I'm sorry. Let me just erase this for a minute. I can just erase the whole thing. I forgot I can put text in this thing. How do I erase? I'm slipping on my let me just close this. Too many things here. Close this, close that. Okay, try whiteboard again. Whiteboard. No. 1 second. Give me 1 second. Whiteboard. Here we go. Whiteboard. New whiteboard. Okay, we don't need this. Okay, now I can just I'm going to do this little sign, this integral sign, and then I'm going to put a text box. Text. There we go. Okay. Text here is t equals 0. And up here, I'm going to put t equals infinity. Okay. All time, whatever it is. Now, and here I'm going to put the word chesed. Put Hebrew. I can put the Hebrew. Chesed. How's that? Okay. If I take God's chesed, make it bigger. Put that over a little bit. There we go. Okay, God's chesed. Okay. If I take chesed, I've moved over too far. Okay, it's better. I shouldn't. I'm failing on this now. Now we need an equal sign. 1 second. That's good. And now we need a text. Get that up. New text. Okay, text equal. Okay. And now I put emet. Okay, I hope someone understood this. I need the equal sign over here. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, that's better. Maybe you see it like that. That's good. In other words, if I take God's chesed from the beginning of time to the end of time, it equals emet. Does that make sense? In other words, emet I see as a comment on the second God says he's Rav chesed. It doesn't seem fair. So if I look in a different, no, I'm using integral because at any one moment, any snapshot in history, right? It doesn't look fair because some people get chesed who don't deserve it, and some people don't get chesed who do deserve it. So any snapshot in history, it doesn't look balanced. Things seem out of proportion, and God's chesed doesn't seem fair. But if we look over from the beginning of time to the end of time, it'll all make sense. So over time, God's no, as Oseh chesed is clear, but Rav chesed and Notzer chesed over time will be emet. So I just see that as a comment. That's all.
I have no idea.
I hope that made sense to somebody. But I'm saying it's because people don't use emet as a midah later on because emet is just it's true. It's something it's emes, but it's
Menachem, because there is no time for a God. So he always sees the totality of
the
everything.
wider picture. Yeah.
And so it's emet.
Okay. Now I'm bringing that up because when people pray, they don't use the word emet. Yeah, but one time in Tehillim, which is from a different angle. Now,
But it
let's
says
take a look
chesed
at how Moshe
ve'emet.
davens now after Cheta. For this time, we talked about this before. After Cheta Raglim, after Cheta Egel, Moshe bows down quickly and tells now that God says, "I can forgive." Right? God prays them now. Yelech Hashem b'kirbeinu, even though we're Amkshe Oref, even though we're stiff-necked people, and forgive us whenever we sin. And God says, therefore, I'm going to make a brit. And that takes us, that's how Chazal understand the brit of the 13 attributes. So beforehand, after sin of Chet Egel, God said, I'm not going to go with you. I'm going to send a malach, because I'm not going to go, because you're an Amkshe Oref. And after God's attributes of mercy, Moshe prays, come with us, even though we're Amkshe Oref. That's the wordplay with the word ki. Here it means because, and here it meant because you're an Amkshe Oref, I won't get you. And now Moshe says, even though we're an Amkshe Oref, I think, but the wordplay is intentional to note the difference between the two. Now, in contrast to that, you have the word, and you have after Chetam Raglim, he doesn't pray to wipe out the sin and bring the Shekhinah back. 40 years where nothing happens, basically. We have to wait for a new generation to grow up. Now, we did this before. I just had it on the source sheet. I used the word kapara, which comes up in the we have it first in Gan Eden, but the main time we have kapara is Moshe goes up and says, I'm going to go up, ulai chapra bat chatchatchem. He's asking for protection from punishment. Notice what my claim is kapara is a protective type of cover, and because Chad Shekhinah is present, he should use midat hadin, but kapara protects us from midat hadin and enables us to ask for midat rachamim. What I'm saying is kapara is the first stage in repentance, where even though you should be punished, God will hold back punishment or protect you from that punishment, even though you might be deserving. And therefore, what's going to protect the Aron, and all through the Mikdash, we have this theme of protection of the kaporet, with the word kapara, and the kaporet, which is covering the ark, which has kruvim on it, and the kruvim protect unworthy entrance back to Gan Eden, as we know from that story there. And the main point I want to talk about on the thing is we have this whole kapara ritual on Yom Kippur, and the purpose is, why do we need kapara? Hashocheni tam b'toch tumatam. Remember, v'chiper al kodesh, he does that whole service, sprinkling the blood here and there. What's the purpose? But our sins with God cause a separation. Notice the sins cause tumah, which means God and the Jewish people can't be together because of our sins. But even though we've sinned, we want God to dwell with us. Even though we've sinned. That's Moshe's prayer. That was my whole point before, where Moshe prays, Yelech Hashem b'kirbeinu, come with us, even though we're an Amkshe Oref, and forgive us for our sins. Now, God's midat rachamim enable us to remain God's people, even though we're not deserving. And therefore, the summary pasuk of the whole ritual of Yom Kippur is we're doing this because God dwells with us, even though we're tamei. But we have to show God that we're thankful that He allows us to remain His people, even though we don't deserve it. So I think the paradox we talked about last time was that what makes us, we're not worthy because we're an Amkshe Oref, because we're stiff-necked people, we're not worthy of God dwelling among us and allowing us to represent Him. And therefore we have to show God that we're getting something we're not worthy of. But what makes us worthy is our recognition that we're not worthy. That's the way I understand the Yom Kippur Avodah. Because we're showing God what makes us worthy is we love our job so much. Now, that doesn't mean God automatically forgives you, but knowing that you want to do your job and we want to be worthy, we want to do our best because we realize our shortcomings, that enables the whole process of kapara. That was God's attributes of mercy enable us to learn from our mistakes. That's what I want to now develop in the stories. Okay, now we had the sin of the spies, and God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, that what do you call it? How long are these people gonna not despise me? Give me why am I so upset from their behavior? They don't trust me, etc. And I'll make you a goy gadol. Going back to the theme in Bereshit, and Moshe says two reasons. One is Egypt will hear, and there'll be a big chilul Hashem. And then if you kill them all at once, people you'll look bad. And then the cutest wordplay is Moshe prays Yignau na koach Hashem, that God's overcome your with your greatness, overcome your anger to forgive us. But look what he quotes now in the Midot of Rachamim. Hashem erech hapayim Rav Chesed. He doesn't say notes. He says obviously Rav Chesed, but he doesn't say emet. But that's my whole point. You don't need to say emet because we just want Rav Chesed. We're not making a comment about that in the long term it's fair. We're just saying use your abundance of Chesed, like you said, and then noseh b'am v'fesha v'nakeh lo yinakeh. But no, he quotes them, but he leaves out the word emet. So I'm trying to explain why the word emet is left out. Because I don't see it as a classic midah. On the other hand, we want God to have slow to anger, give forgiveness or give chesed for people who even don't deserve it, carry away our sin, and surely you can clean away and hold off punishment for up to 2, 3, 4 generations, and therefore forgive the people. Say, remember, Yignal Koach Hashem, then Tzlach Lavon Zekegorach Haznecha, like we say this Pesach Yom Kippur, I think in Kol Nidre. And like you've done up until now, and God says, which means what? What'd you ask for? Don't kill them. Okay, I won't kill them. But I'm not going to bring them to Israel. Therefore, Volam, I'm forgiving you like you asked for. I won't kill them, but I'm not going to bring them to Israel. And therefore, because of my glory, etc., and the way you've behaved, all the people, I'm not going to kill them now because that'll be Chil Hashem, but I'm not going to bring them to Israel. And therefore, they can't see the land. And that leads to the punishment. The consequence is the punishment of 40 years. So that's the last 40 in Chumash. Now, and Moshe uses that in his speech in Sefer Devarim, like remember the 40 years in the desert, 40 years. And whenever he gives Musar, he says, remember the 40 years. Now, as you mentioned, the big 40 years is in Sefer Shoftim, and without getting through all share in Sefer Shoftim, but everyone knows Shmuel Navi's famous thesis in Sefer Shoftim, that there's a cycle going on. The people leave God. Remember, they followed other gods. God brings, because of our bad behavior, God brings an outside enemy to punish us because there wasn't anti-Semitism yet. So the reason for the trouble was because we left God. God sent an enemy to punish us for what do you call it? For things. We sort of got the message and cried out to God to save us from our enemy. We did a bit of Teshuva, and then after we did Teshuva, God sends a shofet to come and save us. Now, all the shoftim in the first part of the book, Otniel, by chance, he's shofet for 40 years. Ehud, 80 years. That's 2 times 40. And then Shamgar is within him. Okay, Devorah, 40 years. Gidon, 40 years. That can't be a coincidence. In fact, if you add up all the years, it's too many years in Sefer Shoftim to fit within the 369 of from when you do there's too many years there. And therefore obviously the years overlap a little bit. But the book is purposely using all the good Shoftim in 40 years. Now, when does that stop? It stops with Avimelech, who's antithetical to the Shoftim, because these Shoftim are basically good people. Like they get the people to do tshuva, they're good leaders, they act properly. You can find little things here and there, but they're basically the good Shoftim. They take leadership the right way. Where Avimelech, right, he's antithesis to ideal leadership, because remember how he gets into power? He kills his 70 brothers. He takes all the thugs in Shechem with him. In other words, Avimelech is the exact opposite of a melech should be. And therefore, Avimelech is not a shofet, bichlal. What do you call it? And he names himself Abimelech. His father obviously didn't name him Abimelech because his father doesn't want a king. Whether that's good or bad, that you can argue. But at least he meant well, Gidon. But the worst example, that the theme in Sefer Shoftim is, because Shmuel's writing it, Gidon had a good reason not to accept the kingdom. But when the right person for the job said no, the wrong person knows. When the right people don't take leadership, look who we get instead. So Gidon has an Aishita, you don't need king, God's your king. But when he abdicates and doesn't take leadership and leaves that vacuum, the worst son of them all kills his brothers and makes himself king. And that's part of the message of the book, that I think that, because the next time people ask for a king is in the time of Shmuel, and God's telling Shmuel, they might be asking for the wrong reason, but saying no isn't going to help again. And therefore help them, make sure to develop a kingdom the right way. But there's in that whole cycle of Sefer Shoftim, the Shoftim who get the people to do proper tshuva are God's answer after they've done proper tshuva are after 40 years. After 40 their cycles of 40 years. So therefore you can't miss the theme of tshuva in Sefer Shoftim, and the book purposely uses the number 40 to highlight that event. And then the Shoftim who aren't so good, which are obviously Avimelech and Yiftach and Shimshon, their leadership, you can't compare their leadership to Ehud, Devar, and Gidon. Because Avimelech's the worst of the bunch. Yiftach causes a civil war, and Yiftach has a story with his daughter. Yiftach, he does some good things, but he's definitely not portrayed in the best light. Chazal say it with Shmuel, Yiftach Bedoro, Shmuel Bedoro. You have to listen to the leader, but the best leader Shmuel, the worst one Yiftach. So that tells you a lot. And Shimshon isn't your classic national leader. He's just he brings Yeshua in a very backhanded way. No, then that's just a source sheet from Sefer Shoftim, which we're not going to do. But why the last stories in the book? What happens when you don't have a king? But again, all I want to put to fit my title of 40 years of the theme of Tshuva and Tanakh. All Sefer Shoftim is about the theme of Tshuva, and bottom line, what causes people to do Tshuva, what should motivate Tshuva, is going to be what's going to motivate Tshuva is if punishment is understood properly. If we have an enemy attacking us and we're losing a battle, and the people realize, oh, this is bad, and we try, God, come and help us, but the Tshuva has to become with the people realize we've done something wrong, we want to do better, and that's why they cry out. And when it just happens almost like a broken record, then God gets really angry because it's not sincere, and then God has to bring even a harsher punishment, and that'll be the Plishtim. Who's going to fix it? Shmuel is going to be the leader who gets them to do proper Tshuva and sets up the kingdom and gets Tshuva going right. And Shmuel's final king, the final king he points, David, he's going to fix it with, if you know Tidim 107, we have the same cycle of crying out, but David, not just in these 40 years, it always ends with Sheket. This cycle ends with Sheket at the end, quiet. David ends with Hodaya, if you know Tidim 107, but that's a shir in Tehillim, not for now. Now we got to get to, okay, this wasn't on the source sheet, but this is the idea. We'll go back to this next week when we do the piyutim, because this will come up in the piyut this comes up in piyutim. But the idea that when a war breaks out, or when we're having trouble from our enemies, or any type of disaster, it's a call to do tshuva. Shlomo Melech says that explicitly when he builds the Mikdash, and he prays in chapter 8 in Sefer Melachim. He says, Shlomo davens, listen to the prayer of your servant and this prayer of your nation who are going to argue with you or pray to you. Take the case in this place, and you should listen from heaven and hear our argument or our prayer and forgive. Now, listen the two classic examples. Should we be losing in battle against our enemies because we've sinned? The enemies are successful because we've done something wrong. Therefore, we don't just go and pray to God, save us from our enemies. We have to do tshuva. We have to return to God, recognize your name and our purpose, etc., and pray and supplicate ourselves, right? Ask for chanina in this house. And then we ask God to hear our prayer and forgive us for our sins, to enable you to help us win our battle. We don't pray to God directly, save us from our enemy. We pray to God to help us understand what we've done wrong, recognize our weaknesses, what we've done, try our best to fix our ways, and in light of that, God should forgive us and be able to bring us back and save us in battle. And the same thing right out of Shema, whenever there's a drought and the heavens are closed up. Why? Asher yachtulach. That's why I have every day daily kriyat shema in Parsha Dekev. We pray to God in this place. Umichatatom yeshuvun kita'anim. They have to do tshuva from their sins. Then God can answer them. Or that's there's the argument. It's tanim. It's God will answer. Or that's why they're being afflicted because of their sin. But we pray to God. Atat tishma min hashamayim. You listen to our prayers and forgive the sin of your nation. What will cause for forgiveness? Ki toreim et haderech hatova asher yechuba. You'll come to the temple and not just pray, but you'll get instruction from the Kohanim or the Levim, whoever the rabbis are there. You'll get instruction in the temple to follow the good way, which you should go, but l'lechet b'drachav, l'lechet in the ways of God. And in light of that, God will give you rain. In other words, you don't pray, oh God, there's a drought, give us rain. We pray, we do tshuva. Show God we want to do better. Try our best to do better. We do vidui. We try to understand how we can improve our behavior. And in light of that, God will answer our prayers and bring us rain. So that's the two stages of prayer, which are key for tefillah, that we learn tefillah from the Mikdash. I'll go back to that next week we'll see this in Piyutim. Now, the same thing, should war break out in your land, Shlomo is understanding this pasuk carefully, the way Chazal do, should war break out in your land, this is from this law of Chatzotzot in Sefer Bamidbar, in chapter 10, okay? What do we do when war breaks out? We blow with Chatzotzot, we blow a trua, we blow like a shofar type sound, but with the big trumpets in the temple, to remember that God is judging us for this, so that we remember God and so He'll remember us. And assuming that we do tshuva when we hear that shofar blowing, then God enable God to save us from our enemies. And the way Shlomo understood these psukim is not the blowing the shofar will bring God's help, but we have to hear the shofar that will cause us to do tshuva, and then that will bring God to come and save us and remember. We'll remember our purpose and we'll do better, and then God will save us. So basically, Shlomo in his prayer is taking this psukim and explaining them step by step, which is the whole theme of Rosh Hashanah davening, because it's a yom. We blow a trua, yom trua, the beginning of the year, to remember, to be worthy of a good year, of a good judgment on God, and we don't blow shofar to wake God up. We blow shofar to wake ourselves up, and that's why the commandment is to remember lishmoa kol shofar. The mitzvah, even for the person blowing the shofar, we don't make a bracha litkoa shofar, make the bracha lishmoa. Because the goal is not to blow the shofar, the goal is to hear the shofar. Even the person blowing it has to hear it. So that's why hearing the shofar has to cause tshuva, which is exactly our prayers. Tshuva, utfilah, utstaka, utfilah, tshuva, utstaka, babrin Torah, etc. All three come together. But basically, all Rosh Hashanah prayer and Vidui is built on the same idea. And then the famous pasuk from the end of Musaf, even when you're not in trouble, on your holidays, remember that you're being judged for the upcoming year, and you blow with the korbanot on the holidays. Again, the time of Zikaron, like we say on Rosh Chodesh, and therefore our Rosh Chodesh and holidays are routine checkups, so we won't need to. I compared this to a routine checkup by the dentist, and this is when you have a root canal. That was my analogy before. Okay, and in Hilchot Tanit, just to put icing on the cake, to show I'm not making this up, Hilchot Tanit, Rambam begins with these psukim. It's mitzvah taseh from the Torah. Whenever there's to blow up with the chatzotzrot or blow shofar on any trouble that befalls the Jewish people and the tzibor, and from the pasuk we just read, Al tzar tzaretchem, klomar kol davar sheyatzah lechem k'gon batzoret, no matter not just war, but also famine or a pandemic, medical issue, or locusts coming, hurting our crops and things like that. Anything similar causing damage to the nation, we have to cry out and blow shofar. The Rambam that people don't quote enough, but it was when we pray, it begins with our introspecting. Well, what are we doing wrong? Not what other people are doing wrong. Each group has to do its own introspection, and then he quotes speaking from Yirmiyahu, and realizing that there's bad things are happening. We're partially to blame. You can't just blame it on your enemies. You have to ask yourself what we're doing wrong. That doesn't mean the enemies are righteous; they're also evil. But God's allowing them to be successful, and we have to do tshuva. What to do tshuva? Ask your local rabbi, but you have to do some type of tshuva and ask yourself what could be doing better. Yeah. But if you don't do that, if you don't cry out and don't blow shofar and don't ask yourself what you're doing wrong and say, "Oh, this is by chance. This is minhag olam. What's happening?" and this happened by chance, this war, this trouble, etc. That's derech achzariyut, because that's evil. That's going to be evil because people won't do tshuva, and they'll continue their bad ways. They won't learn from their mistakes, and there'll be more sorrow. So basically, what I'm trying to show you, based on this the way the Rambam understood the Psukim and Chumash, based on how Shlomo HaMelech understood them, the whole theme of tshuva is built into the system. In other words, God doesn't expect things to be perfect. We'll live our lives, we'll make mistakes. And to help us learn from our mistakes and grow, God will bring trouble, but the hope that when trouble happens, we'll pray and improve our ways. But that's the system we have now is for sure after the Mabul, and then again for Am Yisrael, after Chet HaEgel. With God's attributes of mercy, God can forgive. But that whole theme of we talked about that, the way life works now is don't be surprised when trouble breaks out, and don't be surprised when people go bad. People tend to do evil. Sometimes even when they mean well, they do bad things. But when bad things happen, it's a time to call out and introspect and ask what you can do better. Again, what to do better? Read Nevi'im, I call read the rabbis or listen to the rabbi's speech. Depends again which rabbi you're going to listen to, but or learn Nevi'im and try to see what things might God be angry with and try to improve. Now, the last two examples I'll bring is from Eliel. What happened with Eliel? Let's just give a quick review of the story we're given where we have 40, but it's a classic story of Teshuva and Navi. So again, I had Sefer Shoftim. We had our Teshuva there. We had Teshuva in Sefer Shoftim. We had Teshuva with Shlomo building the Beit HaMikdash, David and Shlomo. I could have brought Shmuel in Mitzvah. I should have brought that after Shoftim. Actually, Shmuel is also 40 years. I should have mentioned, yeah. I forgot that part. Shmuel, let me just show you inside. I'll do a break here from my source sheet. Open up Sefer Shmuel, chapter 7. Shmuel Aleph, chapter 7. Where are we? Bible, Samuel, chapter 7. Put these guys away. Okay. After the Aaron comes back from the Plishtim, remember they brought it back, and for some 20 years the people were doing, crying out to God, and then they realized their mistakes, and Shmuel sees they have remorse, and Shmuel says to Beisav, Im b'chol levavchem atem shavim. Don't give me phony tshuva like Sefer Shoftim. Give me real tshuva. Get rid of your other gods. Prepare your heart. Remember, achanat halev. Get your heart ready, and serve God alone, right? And He can save you. And Bnei Yisrael, listen, they get rid of the idol worship they had. And again, they were doing idol worship and God worship, and now it's called syncretism. Now they're dedicating themselves to God. But just saying that's not enough. Shmuel gathers the people in Mitzvah. He prays on their behalf, and they go to Mitzvah, and they pour water symbolically, and they pour it in front of God. They fast, and there they do vidui. They say we've sinned, and Shmuel's being judgmental of them. In other words, he's judging their behavior. He gives the rabbi speech in Mitzvah, and in light of that, they're worthy of God helping them against their enemies. The Plishtim come and attack, and Shmuel helps them win, and that's how we get Even Ezer. You know that story when God saves them. Where'd they get to? Even Ezer. So they use that name for a chelik in Shulchan Aruch about Ezer Kenegdo. The laws about women. And one of the pillars of Shulchan Aruch is called Even Ezer. So in Tanakh, Even Ezer is a place where Shmuel puts up rock, and God helped us to this point. But because when God made woman, it's Ezer Kenegdo, so in Shulchan Aruch, that whole section about marriage laws is called Even Ezer. That's beautiful wordplay. If you have time, look up where Shulchan Aruch comes from. That's from Yechezkel, but you have to look that up on your own. But all the names of from Yeshayahu, Zum Miyoredeya, and Orachaim Bimina, the names are really beautiful, but that's a different topic. Now, by Shmot Yisrael Kol Mechayav, and he builds a Mizbeach. What I think it was 40 years, probably at the end of chapter 8. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Shmuel is Shofet for 40 years, maybe. Am I wrong? Where's he died? Vayishkechu, Vayzaku. I'm pretty sure he's 40 years also, but he's the one who does the big tshuva when they sets up the king. I don't know why I think it's 40 years. Maybe I'm wrong. But the whole theme of Teshuva is definitely from Shmuel doing proper Teshuva after the time of the Shoftim. Now, let's get to Achav, and I'm going to show you what happened with Achav. Achav. Because that's our title. I have to end with Achav. We have 5 minutes. Share and Achav. There we go. So if you know the story of Achav, Achav makes a treaty with Lebanon, with Sidon, the king of Sidon, and part of that treaty is marrying his daughter Izebel, who we name our trash cans after in modern day Hebrew. Remember the word Zevel? So that's Jezebel, if you know your name. So the now the reason for it wasn't because there weren't enough Jewish girls to marry. The treaty he makes with Sidon, which was the big port city, and Achav has the land routes, and Achav makes peace already with Yehuda, and he and Yoshaphat get along great together with the king of Yehuda. They go to war together. The country grows leaps and bounds, and they're super successful. But the price, the cultural price that Achav has to pay with the treaty with Western culture of Lebanon and the Mediterranean basin comes Baal worship and Asherah worship, and therefore Izebel comes with Avodat Baal, remember 400 Nevi'ei Baal and 450 Nevi'ei Asherah, and they come and ruin the culture of the country, and that's what Eliyahu fights. Now, Eliyahu thinks, and remember Baal is a rain god, and Eliyahu thinks that he can stop the rain, and then he doesn't want to get rid of Achav, he wants to surgically get rid of Izebel by showing them you don't need Baal for rain, God's in charge of the rain. And therefore, he stops the rain and has the big showdown. I'm sure everyone knows the story in Har Carmel, and the rain finally comes, and then they all get together and kill all the Nevi'ei Baal. If you know that story on Har Carmel. Now, after that's over, what happened? He's hoping that in light of that, Achav will realize it and get rid of Izebel, or the people rise up against Izebel. But the next day, what happens? Ahab tells Izebel what happened. Izebel sends a messenger and tells Eliyahu, I'm going to do the same thing to you. She basically puts out a death warrant for Eliyahu. Now, Bayar, this is a great word. What does Eliyahu see? Nothing. In other words, instead of people coming to his help, he sees that no one's coming. It didn't have any effect. It lasted one day. The great showdown, I always bring that example for Yom Kippur. But when we say Hashem Hu Elokim at the end of Yom Kippur, that's what they said in Har Carmel. It lasted one day. So unfortunately, that's what happens to us sometimes too. We scream at Hashem Elokim, but that was half in chest, half a little bit of musr. But he sees that it had no long-term effect because he said, "Let's still there," and no one comes to help him. And he gets up. He's basically depressed. He says it didn't work after stopping the rain and doing so much damage, hoping this would fix things, and doesn't change anything. And he runs away again to Beersheba, Yehuda, and there he goes. And we have he goes in the desert, similar to the Hagar story. He sits under a rotem echad, very similar to the Yonah story again. He wants to die. I'm sure. I think Rabbi Shulman is giving a series on Yonah. I'm sure he's going to get to this. I don't know if he did that yet, but I'm making my assumption. But there's a lot of similarities between Eliyahu and Yonah. We'll see if there's 40 days by Yonah. We'll read it in a minute. And then he says, I failed. Okay. He says he wants to give up. And then before he quits, God, gives him food to recover a little bit. And then he gets up, recovers, eats and drinks. He goes with that eating for 40 days and 40 nights until Har Chorev. Instead of coming to Har Chorev and then having 4 days and 40 nights of Torah, he travels 4 days and 40 nights to Har Chorev. And in Har Chorev, it said the Shekhinah coming, the Shekhinah is leaving. And then remember, in Har Sinai, there's Eish and there's Kolot and Brakim, there's like all these theatrics. And then he comes in, basically, he submits his resignation, God accepts his resignation. But remember, God tells him, Seva Mata Bahar, and God passes over him. Remember? And what do you call it? Below Baruch Hashem, below Barash Hashem. Okay? And no Eish Hashem. Notice all the things we had in Har Sinai aren't here. But again, you have 40 days and 40 nights in the backward side where God's saying we have to basically, just like the flood is a start over story, we have to start things over again. And therefore, God's got to tell Eliyahu to appoint Elisha as his successor, to appoint a new king of Israel. We have to wipe out the house of Achav. That'll be Yehu's job. And we need a new educator because Midat Hadin of Eliyahu didn't work. So we need Elisha. and we need a foreign nation to give us trouble that'll be Hazael, the king of Aram. And within 20, 30 years, the people finally do tshuva, but not the quick way, but the slow way. Wait, that's a theme, and that's a class already in Elio. I'm just saying that the whole theme of tshuva, again, is centered around the theme of 40 days and 40 nights, is a process of tshuva after Am Yisrael has gone astray, and the first level of punishment wasn't enough. Now, with Yonah and Nineveh, remember what's he call out? You got when Noah. This is already in chapter 3 after he learns his lesson. You know, when after he's saved from the was it? It's called a dog? It's not called a dog, is it? I forget whether it's called a dog. The fish, the whale.
Yeah, gadol.
Yeah, but he spit out, and everyone knows the story. Does it say a whale? It's called a whale, but whatever it was. He comes up, and God tells him, "Go to Nineveh and call it to Teshuva." Yonah gets up, and Nineveh was a big city. And so again, 40 days with the theme of Teshuva. Again, that can't be by chance. So the people of Nineveh do Teshuva, good or bad. In Pshat, they did it real fast, etc. And then Yonah is unhappy because they did Teshuva, because he doesn't think it's fair. Why does God, let people get away with bad behavior and just pray a little bit and forgive them? And then he says, that's why I didn't want to thing. He says, but here in an opposite way, he's saying, he says, why didn't I want to go? I was afraid you would forgive them. But listen to the middle, he says, so again, Rav Chesed, no emet here, again, except his last name is Emet. You knew that, right? Yonah ben Amitai. Emet is his last name, is his family name. And Yonah, it goes back to the flood story. There's so many parallels between the flood story and Yonah. Yeah, I hope you realize that. There's 40 days, there's the being swallowed by the water, punishment, tshuva, and fixing things afterwards. But the bottom line is there's always room for tshuva. So if you know the story of the Kikayon, at the end, what does God teach him? I don't know if you ever heard this shot, but the Kikayon at the end, no, he's unhappy they did tshuva, remember? Now, and then what does he say? He says that I would he says I'd rather die. He wants to give up, like pretty much like Eliyahu did. Now, so first God is really hot heat. Then God brings his kikayon, this little plant that covers him, gives him shade, like a little sukkah, and he's happy. And then the sun comes, or some snake comes, or whatever, not a worm, eats up the kikayon, and he has no shade again. He's all upset. So God asked him a question: weren't you happy for those 20 minutes of shade that you had? No, it's gone now. You were suffering, you had some shade, you were happy. So it went away, but weren't you happy for those 20 minutes of shade? And Yonah says, yes. So God says, even though tshuva didn't last, that's why I think the theme of Yonah is so important. Even though tshuva didn't last forever, they went back to their bad ways, the people in Nineveh, but at least for some time they did tshuva. And God's saying, tshuva is important even if it doesn't last. Even a day of tshuva, even a week of tshuva, a couple years of tshuva, even if tshuva doesn't remain and people go back to their bad ways, the short time that they did tshuva is still valuable. It's not a win-lose kind of game. There's a process of tshuva, which is key to your relationship with God, and there's value even tshuva, even if it doesn't last for a long time.
Do you think the word Nineveh Nepechet means reversal of judgment as well as destruction of Nineveh?
You have the word by stone, you have the word Nepechet. I think it goes back to Gan Eden with the Cherub Mitapechet. By the way, I found something really interesting. As long as you have, now God's name in Breshit is Elohim. Only in Gan Eden is God's name Yud Kei Vav Kei Elohim. That you're all familiar with. Now, when David is about the Mikdash, David mentions Yud Kei Vav Kei Elohim. It's about 4 or 5 more times in Tanakh, always relating to the Mikdash or building the Mikdash. But as far as the verb of God Himself doing something, no, it's Vayitzav Hashem Elohim. Vayitzer Hashem Elohim. Now, Hashem Elohim described by Tanakh as God doing something. It was God acting, God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, doing something. Like in creation. in chapter 2 and 3. It's Vayitzer Hashem Elokim, I mean Hashem Elokim, Yud Kevav Ke Elokim, Vayomer Yud Kevav Ke Elokim, Vayetzmach, no, all through the Gan Eden narrative in chapters 2 and 3, that's God's name when he does actions. Never again in Tanakh, except in the end of Yonah. You knew that? I'll show you. I'll just show you real quick. It's something I discovered by chance this week. So I asked a bunch of people asked in Shiva. No one else noticed it before that I asked.
Menachem doesn't the double name is when he's talking about man. Elohim all by himself creates everything up until man.
Up to man, no, but then only in Gan Eden is God. From the beginning of Gan Eden, God's name is Yud Kevav Ke Elokim.
Right, because in Gan Eden he's dealing with man.
Yeah, okay. After man, but the Elokim makes man in Perek Aleph. But as soon as you get to Perek Bet, you get what's like that? Bereshit we got to go to.
The focus
Bereshit.
to man, and that's the double name.
Actually, I'll just do it with here. I'm sorry, chapter 2. But all the verbs, God's doing everything, is okay, Vayitzer Yud Kevav Ke Elokim. Then Vayita Yud Kevav Ke Elokim. It's over and over again when God's doing things.
Adam.
Yeah. Vayetzmach Yud Kevav Min Adamat It's Konechmat, etc. But God's name in every action he does is there. That's it for Tanakh. From the narrator of Tanakh's point of view. From those when Tanakh is describing God doing things, only here, the only time it happens again is in Yonah. I'll show you where in chapter at the end. The word Vayman is unique also. Vayman, remember things happen by, I don't even know how to translate Vayman. Where's Yonah? Yonah is here. In chapter 3, no, chapter 4, right? When but when God makes the fish, okay, Vayman Hashem Da Gadol, right? That's a unique word only by Yonah, Vayman. Prepared, okay. Man is not sure what it means. Remember manhu? But God, whatever it is, it's an interesting word. Now, in chapter 4, what happens? Then Vayman Hashem Elokim Kikeyon. Got it? So Hashem, what do you call it? Let's see what happened here. Yep, he davens, okay. Vayman Hashem Elokim Kikeyon. And then Vayman Elokim Tolat. So God, but then it's only Elokim now. But the only time you have a verb with Yud Kevav Ke Elokim is here. I'm not sure why, but it's totally unique. But the story has to do with Tov and Ra, doesn't it? So again, what midot is Yonah using? Again, like we said, and someone mentioned Ninvei Napechet. There's a lot of Gan Eden imagery in the Yonah story, and here the last topic is Tov and Ra, and Teshuva, and the purpose of Teshuva. So if the Gan Eden story itself is with sin and punishment and Teshuva, now remember how we started the series? That's what I'm going to end with. We started the series with that beautiful piyut that we saw, that Adam Arishon did Teshuva. Remember we did that share? That Adam Arishon did Teshuva? But it didn't say he did Teshuva. But how did the piyut understand it? If God said when you eat from that apple, if you eat from the tree, you're going to die, and he doesn't die, he lives for another, he lives to 930, then what's implied? He must have done Teshuva. So the Paitan, maybe that was the first year we did. That the Paitan they did the same thing with Cain. Again, it doesn't say he did, but the Paitan is picking onto a theme of Chumash, which is all about Teshuva. So it's saying, within the Gan Eden story, as soon as God makes man, that was the whole point of that piyut. From before creation already, God had the process of Teshuva built into it. So God's not surprised that man sins. The question, can man learn from his mistakes? And that's the question, if Adam Rishon did Teshuva as well. I guess so, because he lived for another 900 some years.
No, but he did die.
Yeah, but it seems like he should have died right away. He says, "B'yom ha'chol ben emot tumat."
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Again, we argue whether you can argue whether it's shvat or not. That's a big thing. But the Paitan throws into it the theme of Teshuva, that the Teshuva began with Adam Arishon. And they prove it from the fact that it's supported by the fact that he lived for so long afterwards. And the same thing, Cain lived another 7 generations. He must have done Teshuva also. And then we ended with Ahab. Now let's just go back to my source sheet and finish up, because we're all way over time.
Only Hashem Elohim can create Teshuva.
That he creates just like he made nature basically, he created an Adamic world where he enables tshuva, but tshuva makes life dynamic. In other words, that's why we're different than malachim. Malachim can't make mistakes. You know, there are things in nature that start everything step by set of rules. Humans can do evil, but they can also do good. But they could not only they can do good or bad. After they do evil, they can learn from their mistake and do good. But they can take their actions of evil, of the bad things they do, and grow from them. And that was the whole thing I'm trying to get across.
Himself was
the
a
road of
double
tshuva.
character.
What'd you say, Gershon?
Yonah himself was a double character. He wanted to protect Nineveh and destroy it.
So I got in trouble for this title because it's not politically correct. But when I used to teach it before all this PC happened, my title used to be Yonah was a Republican, but God's a Democrat. But because if you remember, not nowadays, Ben, right? Being old fashioned, where the law and order, or when there's a criminal, is it society's fault, and therefore we have to rehab him, or criminals got to be punished. That's a typical Republican Democrat. It's not right or wrong. Two different gishot of how you deal with evil and people doing bad behavior. Parents have the same issue. Are you forgiving and learn from your mistakes, or you have to punish them hard? You use dina rachamim, and Noach doesn't. I mean, Yonah doesn't like the system of he likes din. He doesn't think there should be rachamim because people take advantage of that. And God tells him, even though rachamim fails and people, God forgives you and you make the same mistake again, but there's a value even in that little bit of tshuva because it's a way of life. We did Achav, we did the sin of Baal worship, we did, and we risen first. By the way, I didn't mention Achav. Later on, God sort of forgives him. Ahab doesn't get punished for the Baal worship because that's understandable because that was for the good of the country's economy. He gets punished for letting Izebel trump up charges for stealing property. So his final punishment is for the sin of Kerem Navot, for the sin of Beinam L'Chavero, not between Beinam L'Makom. That was the thing I'm going to talk about, and we didn't talk about. People do in the Pivutim but this relates to what we saw before. In Yeshayahu chapter 10, Yeshayahu tells the people, the reason why Ashur is being sent to punish you is because of your bad behavior. And you've sinned, and therefore God's bringing Ashur to punish you. The reason Yirmiyahu says, why God's allowing Bavel to punish you, I'm sending him because of your bad behavior. I called you to do tshuva, you didn't listen. But that fits very nicely to Shlomo's prayer and how we understood the Rambam in Hilchot Tshuva. And that was a big theme of tshuva, that when bad things happen, the most important thing we have to do is try to fix our ways. Again, what to understand what you're doing wrong, what to improve on, that's ask your local rabbi. But the need to pray, not just to pray, God save us, but pray, we have to behave better. Everyone has to think of what they can do to do better. Okay, I'll stop here. If there's any real quick questions, I'll take them.
Please send the sources again.
Send the sources again. They were sent out.
They're on the website. We always have our
okay.
source. I mean, I could put it in there, but all our sources always go on the website. Maybe it's better that way. Just go to the website on the program page. You'll see today when we upgraded our website. So you go to the website, you'll see the lecture. So the YouTube video, the audio, and the sources are all in one place.
Wow.
Every class is all the same. So we post before we get it. Obviously, we post it in the chat box as the class goes on. And we put in the emails sometimes if we get it far enough in advance. So the sources of thousands of shirim, they're all on the website. That's really the best way to find it.
I see there's two quick questions. Arnie asked, how do you understand that neither case of golden calf or the sin of the spies is Moshe teach or guide the people toward tshuva, but Moshe acts as intermediary? Yeah. I'm assuming that Moshe gave them tshuva. Chumash doesn't record everything that happened, but the main thing Chumash is teaching us that Moshe argues to give them another chance. The tshuva process is building the Mishkan. Remember, that's doing that project, Kasher Tziv Hashem et Moshe. So the whole second half of Shemot is about doing tshuva. But doing tshuva, not just what we say, but through action. And Moshe active forgiveness, what do you call it? The Dor Midbar, I think they've given up on fixing them. He's just bringing up the next generation because Moshe agrees with God that generation is not going to make it to Israel. He doesn't ask to let them go to Israel. He asks them to actually don't kill them, and wait for the next generation. Okay, very good, Neil. And Okay, John Gottman, studying couples, found that happy couples do hurt each other, make mistakes, but they repel well and often, and repair can increase trust. Okay, very good. Okay, basically, that's the old every chick flick. I hope that's the right word. All the classic movies have the same pattern, where a couple falls in love, you have perfect, marriage, and then there's a crisis. Remember, right before the wedding, there's a terrible crisis, and everything will fall apart. And the last minute, something happens, and they get back, but the crisis strengthened the relationship. That's the format of almost every chick flick. So
I want just to clarify, when you
Yeah.
focused on the word emet, Rav Chesed emet, right? You're making a distinction between the big picture, which is there is always chesed. There's a place for chesed and God's big picture.
Yeah.
But when emet is missing from the text, it means in this instance, in this particular instance,
it doesn't look
can
like
we
it's
ask
true.
for
Yeah.
chesed?
That's
Right.
no, but my point is that after Rachum v'Chanun, like he's a merciful person, right? And Emet doesn't mean he's telling the truth. Emet is like a statement.
Yes.
I see Emet as a modifier. It's my own take on it. I have no idea if I'm right. That wasn't the main part of the show. It was just a little comment because Emet's missing later on. When everyone davens, whenever people invoke the Midot of Rachamim, they never use that. In Tehillim you have it one time in a different context. But when people in Tanakh pray to God, no one ever uses the word emet in their prayer.
Because emet is sort of like din, you you wouldn't want emet.
Yeah. That's why Rav Chesed, that's why I'm saying I see emet as a footnote. Oh, by the way, Rav Chesed doesn't seem fair. So Chazal say Rav Chesed is tzaddik for Rasha v'tovlo, which doesn't seem fair. As opposed to Nosechah seems like tzaddik for Ralo. That's what Chazal say on those psukim, and that's why when Moshe says Hadini Netrachecha in chapter 33 in Shmot, Chazal say on that Moshe is asking God, Lama, why are good things happening for evil people and bad things happening to good people? And so the Chazal talk about God didn't answer all Moshe's questions. He had some things he'll never understand. But that's a beautiful drash. You can find it in those psukim. It's chapter 33, verses 12 to 15, if you want to look it up later on.
Rabbi,
Yeah?
when we're talking about emet, I talk about the pasuk that we say every Shabbat.
ודובר אמת בלבבו וישכם ויאמר?
משפטי השם emet tzedakah כלגיח דף. Like it's all together, it's all inclusive.
Okay, that's like the idea of Echad also. Like we have after Shema, emet means all the emet is after.
I'm waiting
And
about
Vativ Nachon.
pasuk Menachem.
I have a call at 8 with George. We have some food here. I'm going to.
Oh, 1 second. Okay, I just muted. You can put your mic back on. But if I understand right, I'm saying the word emet is used for sure is like in davening. We're making this is a true statement, and it's all that's the classic meaning of emet. But I'm just the word emet doesn't fit with attributes of people. It's usually not a classic attribute. Emet, a person is truthful; he tells the truth. But I don't think that's not a question by God. That's not the same as being forgiving and whatever. Chanun Brachum, whatever you translate Chanun. Brachum is forgiving and Chanun is, I forget what they say in English. It goes back to Chonen Dat. Okay, and Selma says perhaps by man's connected to the concept of providence over man in the Midbar. Okay, because God gave us man. So giving what's providence mean? I know what that word mean.
Providing.
It's in the chat.
The origin.
What's providence mean?
The origin.
Oh, the origin of man. Ah, I see. Okay. I thought he was relating to the midbar with the word manna in the desert.
I think you can use emet as he's an emistic person. He's like
Yeah, that's for sure. But I don't think God knows. I don't know. I don't see that as an attribute of mercy. I see it as an attribute, but not attribute of mercy. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
But it's a comment that doesn't look fair, so it is fair. There's emet there, but we don't understand it. I see it as a modifier. That's all. But what you're saying is emes.
Okay,
That
Rabbi.
wasn't the main
well,
part. That was just a little side comment. I like doing integrals. So I was using that more to explain an integral more than to understanding the midot of God. If you understand math and integrals, but I hope I got my math right. If anyone knows math, fine. Anyway, Jay, go ahead.
No, I just gonna say, okay, 28 minutes for Dr. Gesundheit's
Oh
talk.
yeah, we have to go watch the
English
clips
today. It's in
also. Yeah.
English today, so same channel. We'll go off. You'll have to log back in, whatever.
I'm gonna leave off
Really
now also. Okay, bye-bye.
taping and everything. And then, of course, next Sunday, Rabbi Leibtag will be back. I didn't check the exact time. It's around this time. One of our 6 speakers in our Rosh Hashanah Yom Iyun, starting 9:15 next Sunday morning. Okay, 40 minutes each. Everybody gets 40 minutes each. And we ring the gong bell on the Rabbi Leibtag knows he can't go overtime next week. So anyways, okay, everybody, I hope to see you soon and invite a friend. We have, I think, 11 classes this week, 11, 12 classes. 2 new, Mark Shapiro starting tomorrow night is back on Rav Kook, and Yossi Zlotnik is starting his year on the Haftarot. So lots of extra learning going on. Okay, we'll hope to see you soon. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
תודה רבה.
Bakasha.